Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, it's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk World Boss Ultimate, CULL Obsidian, or Black Dwarf, and give you all of my tips, all of the advice, and team building strategies that I have so that you can take down this boss as often as possible and do it as effectively as possible with different teams. Now, because of the fact that this boss is actually quite difficult, I do want to approach this explanation in this video a little bit differently than the last two for Proxima and Corvus. I still want to discuss best teams, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on the actual damage dealing characters rather than the leaderships or the support characters or the strikers. But in order to explain why it's really important, and in order to show you why this stage is so difficult, I first have to explain the different mechanics in this stage. So really briefly, before we go into this stage, the difficult part of Proxima's stage is the fact that she has those penetrating spears, those purple circles that come down and will kill you and do damage to you no matter what, and you basically have to outrun them because you can't iframe, you can't immune or anything. Corvus' stage is difficult for a similar reason. He has that 5-bar charge up where he summons those circles, but then he also has those purple lines that will also penetrate you in iframe and immunity and will also deal heavy damage to you. Black Dwarf is not like that. He actually doesn't have any moves that penetrate iframes. So believe it or not, if you bring a character in that has tons of iframes, you won't get hit. None of his skills will be able to hit you if you're constantly iframing. What he does have instead is extremely high HP and defense. So unlike Proxima and unlike Corvus, even at low stages, CULL Obsidian has 17 bars of health instead of 15, and just in general he has substantially more HP. So you'll think you're doing less damage because the bars are going down slower, but it's actually also because he has more HP and he has much higher defenses. He has much higher physical and energy defenses than either Corvus or Proxima, but still keep in mind that he has much higher physical defense. So in general, 90% of the time you want to bring energy damage dealing characters against CULL Obsidian. So it also excludes, in a sense, Apocalypse, because while he is an energy damage dealing character, the majority of his DPS, his damage, comes from his 4th skill, the Fists, and that deals physical damage. So besides the kind of core mechanics that make up the actual character in terms of CULL Obsidian's stats, the defenses and stuff like that, the main difficulty for his stage is 2 different effects that will appear on the field, and it doesn't matter how much valor you have, those effects will still happen and they will cripple you because the stage is quite small and because CULL Obsidian has he takes up a lot more space on the stage. Unlike Proxima and unlike Corvus, it's much harder to get away from him. The primary skill that's going to make your life very difficult is called Blade Twister. This is the one where he summons 5 of these dark tornadoes, and they will snare you and they will cause a bleed effect. The other problem, or the other kind of difficult skill that he summons is called Pentagram Trap, and it's exactly the same as Doctor Strange's time freeze effect when he hits you. I can't find it now, but it's on some of these stages. And it's right here. It's a magical trap that causes time freeze. So the difficult part about playing against CULL Obsidian, especially at high stages, like for example 19, he does Pentagram Trap, he does the time freeze, and he does the Twister. But I found a pattern for it, so there is a way to get around it, or there is a way to prepare yourself for it. But those are the 2 main difficulties of CULL Obsidian. So I'm going to jump into this stage now, stage 19, and show you the dual problem that both of these traps and both of these effects present. And this is what makes the boss challenging. It's not his HP, although that is a difficult part. More than that, more than the HP, it's the fact that he has these skills that come in tandem with his regular attacks. As a character himself, he's actually not very challenging. None of his attacks are difficult to dodge. You can just run in a circle around CULL Obsidian and you'll dodge 90% of his attacks. It's very easy to dodge him, but dodging him in addition to dodging the effects that he summons, in addition to doing damage and doing it faster than 5 minutes because that's your time limit, that's where the real difficulty comes into play. So you're gonna watch the timer here, and the very first effect that's going to happen is Blade Twister, is those dark tornadoes. It's gonna happen at 4 minutes and 53 seconds. I went ahead and I timed it for you guys, and it's gonna trigger no matter what, whether you have him at 17 bars, 0 damage done, or you've got him down to 15 or 14 or 13 bars. Unlike Proxima and unlike Corvus, these effects don't trigger based on how much damage you've dealt. It doesn't trigger based on how much damage has been dealt to Cull Obsidian. He only has one phase change, which happens at 9 bars, but it's actually inconsistent. It doesn't always happen immediately after he snaps at 9 bars, but when that happens, he'll run to the middle and he'll do that charge up where the green bar shows up, and we'll talk about that in a second. But unlike those, we have these timed effects that happen no matter what is going on. And the first one happens here in about 3 seconds. You're going to see the tornadoes appear on the ground right here, Blade Twister. It's always 5 tornadoes, and they always last 5 seconds. Immediately as the tornadoes are ending at 4:49, you will see the Pentagram Trap, which is the Doctor Strange time freeze. And this time freeze will pop up and last for 5 seconds. Even after it casts, if you run into it, you will be time frozen. So you basically have to avoid that entire side of the field for 5 seconds. And this is where the true difficulty of Cull Obsidian rears its ugly head. And this is what I've discovered. You basically have a window of 10 seconds where the entire arena is trying to kill you. There's Cull Obsidian, there's 5 seconds of these snaring, bleeding tornadoes, and then right after that, there's 5 seconds of time freeze covering basically half of the arena. So what ends up happening with the fight is you have every 10 seconds you have this happening. There's a 10-second gap here because the Pentagram Trap, the Doctor Strange time freeze, ends at about 4 minutes and 44 seconds, and then the next Twister comes in at about 4 minutes and 33 seconds. So you have about 10 to 11 seconds of empty space where it's just Cull Obsidian attacking you. It's very boring. You can see here this is very difficult, very easy, not difficult at all. But then the 10 seconds of nightmare happen again. You have the tornadoes. Right after the tornadoes are done, you have the freeze trap, and the freeze trap will last for 5 seconds. And this is really what makes the stage difficult, because a lot of rotations for characters, we've gotten used to doing them over and over and over in a rhythmic pattern, and this is definitely not going to work against Cull Obsidian unless you bring very specific characters, because if you get snared, you're going to get stuck, and usually when one tornado hits you, multiple tornadoes hit you, or the same tornado hits you multiple times. That will extend the amount of time that you're snared. Black Dwarf or Cull Obsidian is going to start hitting you while you're snared, and you're also taking that bleed damage. Of course, I'm not dying because I picked my tankiest character, Wolverine, but to illustrate this point, most other characters would have died by now because they would have taken more than 20,000, 30,000 damage, and most characters just don't have that much HP while having enough damage to clear this stage at 19. So that is the main difficulty against Cull Obsidian. To make matters worse, he also has an accumulated damage effect, which means that the more damage you do to him, the more damage he does. So the fight gets more dangerous the lower health he has. It doesn't actually matter how much time is left. He doesn't have an enrage timer, but the more damage you do, when you're at 2 bars and 1 bar, that's when he's going to start to do massive damage to you, and that's what makes this stage so difficult. So now that you know the main kind of trap of this stage, there's a couple of things you can do. The first thing you can do is just avoid this stage. So 19 is probably the worst, and from there on I believe it's the same because they always have both the Blade Twister and Pentagram Trap. You can opt for another stage. For example, 18 only has Blade Twister and does not have Pentagram Trap, or you can opt for an even easier stage that has neither. But that is your first option, is just to avoid it. If you don't want to do that, there's a couple of things you can do to augment your team setup. You can bring in Wasp as a support or as a leadership, because her debuff leadership will allow you to avoid the majority of that. You can still get frozen and snared during parts of the fight because there's a cooldown for Wasp's tier 2 passive. It's, I believe, a 5-second cooldown. Because it activates for 20 seconds and then there's 5 seconds on top because it's 25 cooldown. Or you can bring a leadership like Jean Grey or Angel or Malekith or Supergiant, and I believe there's one more, because they have a debuff removal on their leadership. However, Odin. However, bringing those characters in is going to severely reduce your damage, your DPS, because none of those characters have DPS leaderships. I would much rather bring Beast for the 50% all attack and the self buff that he can pass on to other characters with Stars and Garters, his 5th skill, or Magneto's leadership for Cable. But if I'm bringing in Wasp's leadership, instead of 45% all attack, I'm going to be getting, what is that, 18% all attack? So you definitely have to weigh that problem of debuff versus damage. That's definitely one of the biggest challenges for this stage and why it's so difficult for players to do this at high levels at stage 19. Believe it or not, while Cable is one of the highest DPS characters in the game, it's also very difficult for him to do this stage because he has to stay rooted. Much like the other world boss ultimates, it punishes characters who stay still for a long time. One of the other skills that I didn't touch on that CULL Obsidian does do is that acid trap on the ground. That acid trap will kind of do damage to you no matter what. So it'll penetrate your invincibility, your immunity, etc., your shield, and that is also on a timer. The Blade Twister is on a 20-second timer. I'll list the timers out now so you can understand it a little bit better. The Blade Twister's timer is roughly every 20 seconds, starting from 53 to 33 to 12 or 13, of the minutes. And then the Pentagram Trap is every 22 seconds, roughly at 49, 27, and 06, and then 44, etc. The Meteor, which is the green kind of poison trap, is on a 44, 19, 53 timer, which is roughly 25 seconds, so it doesn't appear that often. But the other thing you can do if you want to try and get away from the Pentagram Trap and the Blade Twister, I don't think this actually works for the Pentagram Trap, but it does work for the Blade Twister, is you can bring along a character that has invincibility or immunity. That's basically the only other way to avoid getting snared, and the snare from the tornado is, in my opinion, much worse than the time freeze. Believe it or not, because it doesn't do damage at least. It just roots you for 4 seconds, that time freeze. So because of that, I didn't want to focus on the leaderships or the supports or the strikers because none of those technically are going to do much help for you besides the debuffs that I've already mentioned. Because of that, the list of damage dealing characters is very short. We have from the best to the worst, in my opinion, in terms of how difficult or easy it is to clear this stage. We have Scarlet Witch, Captain America, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, and Cable. And I put Captain America there only if he's at tier 3, of course. At tier 3, but also at tier 2, he's got multiple iframes, he's got immunity, and he's got a debuff skill. So he's very well equipped to fight CULL Obsidian. You just need him at tier 3 for the damage. I put Cable at the bottom because he has a very one-trick kind of playstyle. It's just 4-3-2, cancel 5, and you have to stay there for a long time. He does have the invincibility, so if you time the invincibility to activate when the tornadoes activate, you can kind of be safe. But that means you have to pause, and it means you're going to do less damage overall, because if you start the fight with your regular rotation, you're going to end up finishing your invincibility as soon as the tornadoes spawn. When you have your invincibility up or when you have your immunity up, the tornadoes won't do any damage to you. The tornadoes have to do damage in order to snare you. So any character, like I said, like Scarlet Witch with her immunity, it's perfect. Doctor Strange with his 6 seconds of immunity is also perfect for this. He will basically never get snared. But the problem with Doctor Strange is the damage. He doesn't do a lot of damage, so it gets much harder for him as you move on in stages, especially up to 19. It becomes very difficult because CULL Obsidian just has so much health. I put at the bottom there Sharon Rogers, Nova, Proxima, and Luna Snow. I have major doubts, but I have some hope for Proxima and Luna Snow. So for those of you out there that have a very powerful kind of CTP of energy or CTP of destruction, Proxima or Luna Snow, let me know if you can clear this stage, because I think it might be possible. I'm very confident in Nova and Sharon Rogers, but it's very difficult because it's hard to keep these characters alive and you need to bring a very offensive setup. Nova will probably be easier than Sharon Rogers, but both of them are kind of up in the air because I wasn't able to do it. I was able to get close, about 6 or 7 bars left. But I'm going to do a full run for you guys now and show you that if you have the immunity up or the invincibility in Cable's case, you won't take damage from the Pentagram Trap and therefore you won't be snared. I know now when it appears at every 20 seconds starting at 53, so I can plan for it. But because of that, I'm going to have to wait, which is going to reduce the amount of damage I do, which is going to make me take longer to clear the stage. So it's a bit more kind of nerve-wracking, but it's overall a more clean strategy. So I'm actually just going to wait here for about this much time, and now when I trigger this, the tornadoes are right there, but I'm not getting snared. I was able to time my damage proc, so I got the majority of the damage. I'm just trying to avoid this trap here, but now I have an extra 10 seconds of free time, so now I can do my rotation normally again. But now in about 4 seconds, we're gonna see another trap. The other piece of advice I have for you guys as far as the spinning mechanic goes, you can run, you should run to the bottom here closest to the camera. That is the safest zone where I am right now. If you have something spawning there like tornadoes or the acid, run like counterclockwise. Run towards the cracked wall and run towards the jungle kind of to the right of the arena. Don't run left. For whatever reason, they designed the game where when you run left, you're actually going to be in his tornado. There's no gap in the wall there. So I think basically if you picture the arena like a clock, you're basically safe from about 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. all the way to about maybe 11 up at the top there, the top left. From 11 down to 7, that left side of the arena, I don't recommend trying to stand there. Every time I do, I end up getting hit by the spinny mechanic of Cull Obsidian. So here we have with the tornadoes, I'm gonna go ahead and do my rotation because I know I'm not gonna get snared right now. We do have the freeze trap on the ground. I wasn't frozen by the trap either, so that confirms that it's neither traps that will affect you when you have your immunity up or your invincibility. We have anti-venom for the heals, of course. And here is the only other portion of the fight that you have to deal with. When he reaches 9 bars, he will go into this charge mode where he has a green bar. If you can destroy the green bar with energy attacks, you will be able to hit him and he'll have a brief stun. However, during this portion of the fight, you'll still have the tornadoes coming up, you'll still have the acid and the time freeze, and especially past, I think, stage 13 or 14, it becomes very difficult because he has so much HP. So I do not recommend trying this. I would just run to the bottom, run to about 6 or 6:30, wait. If something comes towards you, you can run right. I didn't do it very well, so I got hit. But that is my suggestion for you. As well, if you have immunity or invincibility during this portion when he's spinning, you won't take damage. If you also have an iframe during that time, you won't take any damage. But here we go, we're gonna have the traps again. So I have to, yeah, see, I wasn't fast enough there with the 5th skill, and I actually took a bunch of damage, and Cable's gonna die. It's okay. The only other suggestion I have for you if you're still having a lot of difficulty, and I do understand if you are having a lot of difficulty because this world boss is actually quite painful, this world boss ultimate. If you can't time your skills to kind of coincide and sync up with the tornadoes, just switch. It's going to cost you a lot more time, but if you bring in a heavyweight damage dealing character like Cable, you can do it. The only other kind of semi-dangerous skill that Cull Obsidian has is the one that you just saw with the purple lines. You only see it usually when he's under 9 bars. We just saw it there, and it will penetrate everything except iframes. So if you have immunity up or if you have invincibility or shield up, it will penetrate that, but it won't penetrate iframes. So you can kind of take care to just have an iframe up, and then you won't I just died there. That's really bad. I don't think I'm gonna be able to finish this. It's a very difficult stage, and it's even more difficult when I'm talking at the same time. He also does lay down a lava field there when he's below 9 bars, when he does his 5th skill. His skill set is very similar to the one that he uses in the game, so if you have the uniform, if you've played against it, you'll recognize a lot of the moves. But more often, or more so than the actual attacks that he does, I think just memorizing the pattern and the timing of the tornadoes and learning how to dodge them is going to serve you a lot better than watching him, because you can just run around in kind of a half circle or a semicircle, and the majority of the time you won't be hit by his attacks. And just having immunity up, even though sure he's not doing much damage to him, he's not doing much damage to her either. I'm not fast enough there to do damage. But that is all of the advice that I have for you guys for Cull Obsidian. I think the timers are really important. Unfortunately, I couldn't show you guys a full clear, but it'll have to wait for another time, maybe on a live stream, maybe on Twitch, something like that. So let me know what you guys think of Cull Obsidian and how his difficulty is. Let me know if those tips regarding the timers for the different arena environmental hazards helps. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my content. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.